What is up, guys? You're listening to Sports Biz with Rashad. Let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back, guys. I hope you're excited for another episode. Today, my special guest on the show is Mike Wendling, who is the Director of Event Services and Housekeeping at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Now, MLSE is the parent company of the Toronto Raptors, Toronto Maple Leafs, Toronto Argonauts, and the Toronto FC. Mike was kind enough to actually set up a job shadow for me back in February during one of the Leafs games. He is very knowledgeable about the sports industry and just an overall great guy. So, how's it going today, Mike?
Good. How you doing, Rashad?
I'm doing well. Let's start off. Why don't you just kind of talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Mike Wendling. I grew up in Burlington, Ontario. I'm married to my lovely wife, Alex, and we just had our first son. We celebrated his first birthday last week. His name's Winston. I am the Director of Event Services and Housekeeping at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Been with the company for about 5 years and been in this specific role for about 3 now.
Wow, it's pretty cool. You've been there for a bit now. Before we get into that, how's parenting?
Parenting during a pandemic is interesting. Parenting in general has been life changing, and you learn something new every day. And I think my son teaches me more than I'm teaching him right now. But then parenting through a pandemic is a whole other challenge. And at the beginning, there not being able to really leave your house was interesting. I think my wife and I talked that we're going to have a whole generation of kids that are introverts because they just don't see anybody. But now that we can get out and about a little bit, it's been a lot easier.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's good though that at least you can be home for the earlier years anyways.
Yeah, this is a special moment that I won't have with any of our other children should we have any. Being home for the majority of the first year of his life is something that most working parents don't get an option to. We're blessed in Canada to have year-long maternity leaves or paternity leaves, which my wife was taking advantage of, and but being there to share the moments with her, to watch when he crawled for the first time and he speaks for the first time, that's something that I'm very fortunate about, and one of the blessings of the pandemic.
Yeah, that is one of the plus sides. At least everyone gets to stay home with their families, get closer to their families, but it does have impacts everywhere else. So, going into that, let's talk about where you kind of begun your journey. Maybe go into your education.
Sure. So in undergrad, I went to Queen's University, and I graduated with a major in economics and a minor in health. Uh, the minor was more just kind of for fun. I'm a health nut, and so I thought I'd take a few courses, and then ended up being very close to getting my minor, so I did. After Queen's, all my buddies in economics all went off to the banking world, and they're all making a lot more money than I am now. But the financial industry, while I'm passionate about it, it didn't really excite me from a career standpoint. So I took a year off. I went to Belize, and I was a volunteer teacher for a year. And then from there, I applied to Ohio University for their dual master's program. So they have a master's of sports administration and a MBA program. So I went there for 2 years, got both master degrees, and then through the great alumni network of Ohio, I got connected with a role at Oklahoma State down in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I started down there as a manager of ticketing analytics. So doing some data analytics and data analysis of our ticketing trends, our retention modeling, and pricing modeling, and it was great. I loved Stillwater, loved the small town USA feel. Kind of transferred a few roles there, and then when I left, I was the director of ticketing, so I was overseeing all of our ticket sales for our 9 sports there, but mostly for men's basketball and their football program. And then I was happy there. I was going to stay at Oklahoma State, loved it, good people. But then a role came open at Maple Leaf Sports, manager of premium service, and I applied and was blessed to get an interview. Again, it came back to the Ohio Alumni Network. One of my executive mentors when I was at Ohio worked for Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, and he kind of set me up with an interview. And I was lucky enough to get the job, and so I uprooted from Oklahoma and moved back to Canada.
Wow, so quite the traveling experience going all over. You had mentioned you went to Belize. I actually didn't know you had taken a year off. What did you teach there?
So I taught grade 9 math uh, to about 150 kids, 4 different classes. And I coached the high school's basketball team, volleyball team, and softball team, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. And did you ever think about staying there while you were there? Did you think you were going to end up staying for another year or possibly forever? Or did you know it was kind of a short term thing?
I went into it thinking it was a short-term thing. I actually, when I applied to Ohio while I was down there and got accepted, and then I actually asked to defer because I was having a great time, and you're really impacting the lives of these kids, and wanted to do another year, and unfortunately, they'd already turned down, I should say, the other candidates to the Ohio program, and didn't feel like they were in a spot to go back. So they weren't really on board with me deferring, and you know what, that was the right decision. So it turned into a 1 year thing, but yeah, Belize has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, for sure. I went there once on vacation, just stopped off on a cruise, and actually we went to we went on a little boat and then went to these ruins and then came back and had some food, and it was actually pretty cool there. I kind of wanted to go back. Definitely though, volunteering, you got to volunteer teaching, but then not only teaching, you also got to coach there. That's kind of something that I am interested in doing at some point in my life. So it's pretty cool that you got to go for a year at least and get that experience and then come back to Oklahoma State. So when you got to Oklahoma State, how did you find the whole college athletics compared to in Canada here?
Yeah, to be honest, I didn't understand the fandom as a Canadian until I got there. Uh, College football, especially, but college sports in general, they're very close to professionals. The way that the town embraces them, the way that the fans embrace them, the way that they're treated, their facilities. I mean, if you walked off the street, you'd think it was a pro team. So it was nuts. It was awesome. I fell in love with college football. I fell in love with the whole Saturday tailgating aspect and the full day events. It's those are some of the most passionate fans in the world are in college sports. Um, so yeah, I couldn't fathom it until I was there, and once I started working there, I absolutely fell in love.
Would you ever consider going back to work in college sports, or do you think you're kind of happy where you are now?
I'm definitely happy where I am, but to say I haven't thought about going back to the states or going back to college sports would be a lie. There's something special about working in college collegiate athletics. I think um, it's a bit of a messed up system. This whole debate that's going on right now about paying players or not paying players is years overdue, and so I think it'll be very interesting to see how it kind of plays out. Um, but yeah, no, I love the college system, and I would definitely, for the right role, I'd probably think about moving back.
Yeah, for sure. So, coming from someone who worked directly in college athletics, and you brought up the debate, I had written an article about it a couple months ago on what I thought. How would you feel sharing your thoughts on the debate?
Sure. I'll be the first to admit that I was conflicted at the beginning, and again, as a Canadian, I didn't understand it at first. When I went down to Ohio originally, this debate was coming up a lot. So that was, it was 7 years ago now. And my original stance was, these players are getting a free education that should be good enough. I was someone that paid for my schooling at Queens, and I kind of thought that would have been the greatest thing in the world to get a free education, and therefore, they should be happy. Once I got down into the system and was working with these directly beside these athletes, and you can see the amount of money that we gain from on their backs, if you will. Um, they got to get paid in one way or another, and I think the way that they're going is the right way. Like the colleges allowing the players to make money off their likeness is the first step. One of the best, comments that kind of summed it up for me was, you and I could start a YouTube channel and make thousands of dollars off of sponsorships or whatever. But if Joe Burrow had started a YouTube channel, he'd be banned from the NCAA because he was making money, right? And that's insane. That these players can bring in millions of dollars for the school, but they can't use their likeness at all to make any money. So regardless if you go the whole way of making their pro system and they're getting paid from the university or from the athletic department, just this first step of saying yes, you can use your likeness to make money, which should be really realistically anybody's right. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem that they can't pursue their own kind of side hustles, if you will, to make money just because they're in college athletics. So that is a good step. And do you think eventually it'll go to being kind of salaries, or how would you, if you had to kind of implement a policy to pay the players, how would you go about doing that? Would it be a fixed salary or based on their play?
It's tough, right? It's a fine line. You have the haves and the have-nots when it comes to schools as well. I mean, even if you look at the situation right now where some of the conferences are shutting down their football program for the fall semester, and some aren't. I mean, these mid-major schools, they can't afford to pay the same that the Power Five conferences can. And so you really make this kind of class system between the two. And then you would need to regulate it too. So how much, can UCLA pay versus how much can Ohio State pay versus how much could a Tulsa pay, right? It's all up in the air. And then the flip side of that is that, you need some equality or equity across the sports leagues as well. And it's a sad state of affairs, but the reality is that a men's football program brings in a lot more money and has a lot more resources than a women's soccer program, even though the U.S. soccer women's soccer team is phenomenal. So how do you make it equal across genders, across sports? It's a big issue, and it's not one that I think I have an answer to off the top of my head, but I do think these players deserve to make some money when their coaches are making millions and the athletic department is making millions off them.
And I feel like that's even an issue now. I have some friends, and they think that the WNBA players should be making more money because they've heard that some refs in the NBA are making more than they are. But it's a fine line because how much money do these WNBA players really bring in compared to men's basketball in the NBA? And I think there's a difference when you have money and you try to bring it into equality, and it just creates a whole debate. And I feel like it takes forever to make decisions because someone's always going to have a different opinion.
For sure, it's going to take some selfless acts from a large majority of the athletes, a large majority of the administration, to say that it's a chicken and an egg thing, right? So look at the women's the American women's sports soccer team, excuse me. Uh, you know, they're way better than their male counterparts in the world stage. I mean, they've won multiple World Cups and whatnot. And the argument is, well, they don't get as much viewership as the men get, so we don't put as much resources into them. Or the flip side is, well, they don't get as much viewership because they're not shown on TV, and we don't put marketing behind them. We've shown already that when you put marketing behind them and you play them in prime spots on ESPN, that their viewership spikes up. So it really is a chicken and an egg argument that if you can't make the argument that no one cares about them, they're not going to watch them if you're not going to attempt or try to put them in a primetime spot. So it's going to take a rechange of thinking and really some selfless acts across the sports industry to say, if we truly value women's sports, for example, then we need to put some dollars behind it and give it a chance to thrive.
Yeah, I guess that's true. It's a really good point. You just need to give them a chance, because if no one wants to give them a chance, then we're never actually going to know if they can bring in more revenue. And I'm sure they could, like you said, and they are performing better, but they really don't get that chance. And even when you go on TV, you really don't see women's sports being featured on the major channels. Okay, so let's get back on track a little. Back to, I guess you already talked about Oklahoma State. So after that, did you have any other major jobs or teachings that kind of helped you along the way get to MLSE?
So there was no real gap in between, to be honest. I got a lot of opportunity through Ohio and through Oklahoma State to test out different parts of the sports industry. So while I was at Ohio, I actually volunteered at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway for a week or so and helped them put on their major race. and got to test out kind of the sponsorship aspect and the sponsorship activation aspect of sports and kind of see what that life like was like. We did a lot of traveling with Ohio across the U.S. and to talk to a bunch of different sports professionals in a variety of different aspects. Lots of sponsorship, obviously, lots of ticket sales, lots of revenue generation, but also on the operations side as well, and just kind of see what the day in the life of these people was, and that was eye opening. And then I got really involved at the time with the National Sports Forum, so I competed in their Case Cup competition while I was at Ohio, and then attended two more of their uh, sports forums, and they're amazing. You get to meet a variety of individuals across the industry, but then also see kind of what these teams are doing and who are the forward thinkers and who's investing more in technology and whatnot. And it just kind of helps guide you to what you're interested in because the sports industry is huge and there's a variety of different ways to be involved from teams to leagues to brands. Um, there's thousands of different ways you can be involved in the sports industry. So those experiences kind of helped me figure out what I was good at and what intrigued me, and then it all kind of led me back here. And then I took a kind of a gamble and switched from the revenue generation to the ops side, and that's been eye opening as well.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, especially when you're young, a lot of my friends and even me growing up, I thought, to work in sports, you got to be either an athlete and get paid. And if you're not an athlete, you got to be a coach or you have to be the general manager or an assistant coach. And really, people don't think about all of the jobs that relate sports to different parts of business. And I think that's a big one. So going into Ohio, what made you choose Ohio? Did you only apply there? And what kind of drew your interest to that program?
Yeah, so when I came out of university and while I was at in Belize, I realized I wanted to work in sports. I loved business. I love I do like finance and personal finance and whatnot, but my my passion was always sports. And so when I found out I could marry the two between sports and business, I thought it was a natural fit. And then why Ohio? My cousin-in-law, my sister's cousin, um, he actually his name's Andrew Agro, and he went through the Ohio program and ended up working and does work for the New York Jets. And so my sister set me up with a call with him, and just I kind of picked his brain about the Ohio program, and he was like, "Listen, if you want to be in sports, you got to go to Ohio." And so I started researching the program and a variety of other programs. I applied to a few others, Syracuse, South Florida as well. Um, but Ohio really stood out. So the Ohio Sports Administration program was the first one of its kind in North America. It's a super old program now, and their alumni network is massive. And one of their selling points when you go for a visit or you start talking to them is they send you what they call the Ohio Bible, and that's just their alumni directory of where all their alumni are and what their titles are, and it's super impressive. And what I will say about it is not only is it an impressive list of individuals, but 95% of them are open for a conversation or a coffee or a chat at any time. While I was a student, I reached out to 20, 30, 50 alumni and just said, "Hey, I'd love to pick your brain about X, Y, Z." And if you put Ohio University in the subject line, you get a response back, which I thought was really neat. So yeah, it just kind of became a no brainer. And then when I did apply and got on campus for the interview, Athens, Ohio is this tiny little town in southeast Ohio, about an hour from Columbus. The town itself probably has, I don't know, 50,000 people in it at most, and 20,000 of those are from the university. And so it was just it's a really special place, and I kind of fell in love and just knew it was the right spot for me.
So I'm sure you'd recommend that program to anyone that wants to kind of take a master's and combine their passions for business and sports then?
Highly. They're very good to Canadians. They work with a lot of Canadians, which is great. They actually have a big connection to Laurier. Andrew Agro, like I mentioned, is from Laurier, and there's a good pipeline of people that have come down from Laurier, but are all over Canada as well. And yeah, the fact that you can get a master's of sports administration, which is great, but also your MBA in 2 years um, with the financial assistance that they provide as well, it was a no brainer.
Well, yeah, even if it's a busy 2 years, I mean, if you think about all of the experiences and the value you're getting out of those 2 years, it definitely does make sense to do it. You're getting 2 degrees and not taking up a lot of your time. And then definitely the alumni network and how you were saying the kind of Ohio Bible, that's definitely a key selling point that is important now because I feel like everyone can get their MBA or everyone can get their degree from whatever school, but it's more about networking, and that's kind of what gives you the opportunities in the first place. You can mindlessly apply to 500 jobs and not get an interview for every single one, but you know someone somewhere, and all of a sudden you don't even need their interview and you're in there already. So that alumni network is definitely a big selling point. So let's go now into MLSC, and your current role, or from where you started to now. Why don't you just give a little typical day of in your life of what you do?
Sure. So the pandemic has changed a bunch of what I did day to day. But pre-pandemic, when we had events going on in our building, my day was long. So I was in the office for 9 a.m. and I'd have meetings on and off all day long. My team would come in. Usually, the team that was working the event would come in a little bit later. So usually they come in around noon for lunchtime. And then our if the game was at 7 or 7:30, which most events start around then, we'd have our pre-shift meeting around 5, where all the different departments would representatives come into one room, and we'd all talk about what the event was going to look like, how the flow of the event was going to go, anything new or different than the ordinary. For sports games, Leafs and Raptors games, midway through the season, these meetings would be very short and be straightforward, a little step and repeat. When we get into playoffs or if we had a concert or a live event, they'd be a little longer because there's a lot more going on, a lot more to know. And then from there, everyone would go to the positions. My supervisors and managers would go brief the staff, the actual frontline staff. Gates would open, and then the first part of my job, which is overseeing all the ushers and gate staff, would be making sure that all the fans get in the arena as safely and smoothly as possible. So we'd work very closely with security to make sure everyone knows where they need to go. Fans can get around the building on the outside to the open gates as fast as possible. And once they're inside, they know exactly where they're going. So load in is kind of crazy for the first hour, hour and a half, depending on the event. And once the event starts, it's kind of just responding to calls and responding to any issues. And the issues can be twofold, right? So they can be issues with a fan and something that needs to get escalated up to someone like myself, or issues with our staff. The reality is with our game day staff, the only time I would see them outside of a training event would be at the events. So if something's come up and they want to talk to a manager, they want to talk to myself, it's during the events that we get that done. So my team is always running around on the go. My housekeeping team starts even before my events team does, and they're making sure the building is clean and sanitized for all of our fans. The housekeeping department actually is a 24-hour operation. So we have a day crew, an events crew, and then an overnight crew. So we're constantly cleaning, emptying garbages, cleaning washrooms, getting the suites ready, disinfecting the entire building. And then when the event ends, it's make sure all the fans get home safely, give them high fives on the way out. Quick debrief with the team, anything that came up, any issues that are going to overlap to the next day. Write the end of night report so that everyone who wasn't working can stay in the loop, and then do everything over again the next day.
Wow, so very busy, a lot going on behind the scenes during the events. And I think when you're going as a fan, you don't realize, you just see kind of a few people working there when you're at the event, but you're so focused on the game in front of you and you don't actually realize all the behind the scenes that goes on and realize that someone has to run that. And when I was able to come in that one day for the kind of job shadow, I really got to experience the other side and see that as a fan, you just go in, you watch the game, you have some drinks, you eat some food, and you leave. But when I came in that one day, it was like a whole new perspective, a whole new world, being behind the scenes and watching everyone do their jobs. And I didn't even think about it as a regular Toronto Maple Leafs game. It seemed like a whole new experience. And so while you're working, do you ever get to pop in and check the game out and see what's going on, or do you feel like you're always on the go and you can't focus in on the game at all?
You need to be intentional if you're gonna see any of the games. So uh, the average game in November, December, I probably will see maybe 30 seconds of it because there's always something you can be doing. Uh, you know, in all honesty, when you get to a playoff game or a big concert, I'll try to take a time to sneak away and pop my head in and watch some of the live action. But that usually doesn't last very long. There's usually a radio call fairly shortly that you need to deal with one fire or another, or someone else just wants to chat. And our role is to be here for the fans and also to be here for our staff. So that's part of the job, and it's exciting and I love it.
Yeah, well, from a fan, I know you guys are definitely doing a good job coming in to watch the games. It's always been a good experience, so keep that up. And
Appreciate it.
I guess now, how has COVID-19 impacted it? Because the NHL, I know, is still playing the game Scotiabank Arena. Are you going in and working still, or are you kind of just stuck from home?
Yeah, so I'm actually in the office today. I try to get in a couple days a week to check on the team and see how they're doing in this hub or this bubble. But my housekeeping team has been flying since the hub city was announced. So they've been going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for it'll be about 45 days when we're all said and done. Um, and so it's been intense. They've taken it well. They're excited to be back to work. So it's been exciting, but it's been a grind. It's a long tournament. It's great that we have work, and it's great that we're back to some normalcy, if you will. But yeah, it's been a long tournament. Otherwise, the majority of the company, as you and I were talking beforehand, is working from home, and it has been since March. And we're doing everything in our power to plan for the safe arrival of fans again, and lots of contingency planning, lots of sanitization planning, security planning, and brainstorming of how we can get fans back in our building as soon as possible in a safe manner to enjoy some live events.
Well, hopefully that's soon because I definitely know I want to come back and watch a game or two, and I'm sure I got lots of people that want to do the same. But hopefully we can get back soon, just in a safe manner for sure, like you said. Last question for you is kind of one that I asked to everyone, but what is your best advice for someone trying to break into the sports industry?
The best piece of advice I received, and I believe in it, is learn how to sell. So when I was at Ohio, I did not want to go into sales whatsoever. I had no intention of going into ticket sales. I wanted to go into marketing at the time. I thought salespeople were, I pictured the used car salesman. I pictured them as sleazy. I didn't want to go into sales, and I didn't. I went into data analytics first, and then kind of transitioned into a few different roles. And now I'm in operations, which isn't a sales role. But the number one thing that helped me along the way is learning how to sell. And it's not that you need to be a frontline salesperson all the time. You don't need to get into inside sales if that's not your thing. But learning how to sell anything, learning how to sell yourself in an interview, learning how to sell products, learning how to sell is the number one way to get ahead when it comes into the sports industry. And I think it's a great tool to have in life in general.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. Thank you for coming on and thanks for sharing your experiences. It was definitely a good time, good conversation, and hopefully someone will get something out of it.
My pleasure, and congratulations to starting this podcast. I think it's a great initiative on your end, and I hopefully it flourishes.
And that wraps up this episode of Sports Biz with Rashad. Thank you guys for tuning in. If you enjoyed, be sure to check us out on Instagram at SportsBizWithRashad and support us on all other platforms. I'll catch you guys on the next episode.